So I mean, that's really it. It's just being able to do that consistent practice, especially when you don't feel like it. I tell you, there's a
Oh,
lot of mornings when I roll out of bed, I'm on my second cup of coffee, and I'm just like, man, I am just not feeling this today. I'd rather just, just get back in bed, grab the cat and take a nap and just be done with it. But that's where things start to atrophy. That's where the not the bad ideas. That's where the good ideas stop flowing. Is when you allow that to happen. It's just like if you stop exercising, then you're going to get the beer belly and your arms are going to get flabby and all that sort of thing. Um,
exactly.
so that's one of the most important things. The other thing that I really want, and I'm telling myself here, is that you've got to be patient and tolerant and accepting of yourself as an imperfect human being in whatever you're doing, and especially in writing. And I say I'm telling on myself because I don't like to admit this, and I sure as hell wouldn't admit it to a client, but 90% of the stuff I write is just poo. It really is. So many things just get tossed, and I'll get an hour or two into a piece and go, man, I am heading completely in the wrong direction. And you just scrap it. You go take a walk around the block and you sit down and start over.
That's yeah.
But
Yep.
it's easy to go, wow, if I can't sit down and crank out brilliance right out of the gate every single time, then I must suck as a writer. And that's not it at all. If that were the case, I wouldn't have been doing this for 10 years, and I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you right now.
That's true. You're absolutely right. I know. I have no idea how many times you start to write something and it goes, wow, this is wrong. It just doesn't work. It doesn't give you the direction. It doesn't give you the feeling. It doesn't do anything that you intended it for it to do when you sat down to do it. And I always laugh about that. I do. You get up, you walk away. Wait a minute, and you go back and you sit down, and then all of a sudden, then it does come, and it does. Everybody thinks his brilliance is it's there,
Right.
like you said, it's there all the time, and it isn't. Brilliance comes out one word at a time, and that's where it starts to happen. You get, okay, this looks like the correct set of words, and this feels better, and when you're dealing with your clients, and I think Brian covered some of this. I think the last time you guys were on, when he was talking about whether you utilize, is it all your words? Is it a combination of yours and the client's words? I know you try to put the feeling that the person has in it, and how do you place yourself in the position to be able to capture that sense, that feeling that the person has, whether it's good or bad? I mean, people are very emotionally involved in their businesses,
Sure.
and sometimes they are excellent in transmitting that that drive, that belief in their business. Other times they don't. They're probably the worst ones to be an example of their business. How do you go through and weed through that? And I'll explain why I asked that question.
Sure, absolutely. Really, my method involves largely bypassing the client, the person that I'm writing for, and going straight to the end user, the person that they're trying to get to buy the product or service. That's the person that I'm really interested in, because it's about them. It's not about my client as the product seller or as the service provider. I mean, it is in a sense, because you have to be able to have a story to connect to, like we talked about a couple weeks ago. But where I'm getting the majority of the inspiration is from the end user. So like that's why like say if I'm for example writing for a client who has a solution to help with rheumatoid arthritis, then I'm going to go to Facebook groups that are dedicated to serving people with rheumatoid arthritis, so where they hang out, and I'm just kind of hanging back and listen to them talk. And that's where it all comes from, because then you sit down and you find out, what their real problems are. Again, as I said, a couple weeks ago, it's not just the joint pain. It's not just the lack of energy. It's not just the lack of sleep. It's the not being able to sleep in the same bed as your husband because you're tossing and turning all night. Because you can't sleep because your joints hurt, and then insomnia and the whole thing, which leads to strained relationships with your spouse, which leads to marital problems, which leads to more stress, which leads to more sleeplessness, and so forth and so on. And these things, when I take these back to my client, and when I take the copy back and they say, well, why did you talk about this? I don't care about their spouse. I'm not a marital counselor here. Why are you talking about that? Well, okay, you didn't think of it because you're not the one in bed tossing and turning all night. But your client thought of it because that's what they're complaining about nobody being able to help them with.
Exactly. I love that.
So that's where I'm going for. And I've said before that headlines, subheadlines, the important parts of the copy, there are times when I've used phrases directly from something I've seen in a Facebook group, in a blog post, something that's directly from the end user's mouth, because that's more powerful than any trick of language that I could come up with. When you can just turn that mirror and say, look, do you feel like this? And they go, somebody gets me.
Exactly.
Boom. That's just it. So that's the very long-winded and convoluted answer to your question. At least I think.
I think it's excellent, because I think what you touched on something that a lot of people don't think of, and that's the end user. Who's actually using my product? I mean, whether it's another company that's using your product, or whether it's just a Mr. Joe America, using your product. Right. You're right. Their experiences with it are far more important than what you believe the quality of your product is, or the service that you're trying to perform.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, I do envy you. It's amazing to see that ability to do that, to really dig in and get into the meat of what a company is all about, and then to be able to portray that and present that so that when the customer sees that ad, oh yeah, this is it. They really have this on the that's amazing. That 10 years worth of practice, right?
10 years worth of practice and a lot of mistakes.
Absolutely.
And I'm still learning. Every time I sit down to write a sales page, to write an email sequence, even to write a blog post for my marketing, I'm learning something new. I'm learning something new about myself, and I'm learning something new about how I fit in with the world around me, and how I can better serve the world around me.
Uh-huh.
So, and it's that curiosity that drives that growth. I've talked about the curiosity thing before, but it's just always like wanting to know, how can I do this better? How can I create a more authentic connection? And what will that do for the end user, for the person who's reading this, that decides, I'm going, because of the words that I've written, I'm going to take action today. I've lived with this problem long enough. I'm going to take action, and I'm going to improve my life. And in some cases, I'm even going to transform my life.
That's it. And John says it here. He says, Lee is magical with the words.
Thank you. Magic.
So that's it. The magic is there. I love it. Oh, Lee, that's fabulous.
Yeah. That's right. Like you and I were talking a little bit ago about, clients come in and going, well, tell me your whole process.
Yes.
I don't like that, because I'm like, first of all, that's what's in Sales Copy Academy. And second, as far as you're concerned, if you're paying me to write copy, I'm just kind of going off to my magic cave and doing my little magic things and coming back and going, ta-da!
Exactly.
You don't need to be involved in it. Keep your hand out of the cauldron.
That's it. That's it. And it's so it's so funny because so many times, and I spent most of my career was in manufacturing, and dealing with management, upper management, and board of directors, and it was very interesting to see as companies change. Because we all go through, and that's one of the questions I wanted to throw at you too. Is as companies change, they mature.
Sure.
We have obviously at the very beginning you have an entrepreneur, and that is the driving force behind a business. And then as the company becomes successful, it sort of plateaus off a little bit, and the entrepreneur is still okay to do that because there's still several jumps that will happen. Then ultimately the company becomes a mature company, and then it plateaus, and now it's no longer the entrepreneurial spirit behind it to try to drive the company, because now it's just a steady running business.
Hmm.
And usually people don't realize when it's time to leave the company. Okay, yeah, I've done my thing, and I'm the entrepreneur, but this is not what I want to do. It's boring, it's drudgery, it's everything that's the same every day, the same paperwork.
Sure.
How do you change copy for companies that actually go through and are changing like that as they progress through their maturity, their growth?
Really, it's just all about stable branding. It's not losing sight of the fact that you're still serving people.
Okay.
No, it's easy for companies to lose sight of that, and the ones that succeed and the ones that thrive are the ones that listen to their customers, that are actively engaging. We see it all the time. Companies that if somebody leaves a negative review on Facebook, complaining about their services or complaining about the rep that they dealt with and so forth, the companies that are thriving today are the ones that are taking that feedback to heart, and not saying no, you're wrong, but saying, hey, let's take this off Facebook, let's jump on a phone call, and let's talk about it because we want to hear what you have to say.
Very.
Because the companies that can do that can tap into that the same way that I do with people in Facebook groups. If I'm looking for intel to write a client sales page, those companies are able to take that feedback and work it into their business model and work it into their messaging, by being able to say, hey, we listened to you. We thought we knew that what you wanted, and at one time we did, but guess what? We've been talking to you guys. We've been listening to your feedback, and we've found out where we're missing the mark. And here's what we're doing to correct it. Here's what we're doing to serve you better. Here's what we're doing to be a resource. So that's, to me, is one of the staples of writing. I don't write a lot of corporate copy. I'll be honest with you. I've done it. I can do it. But to me, I'm a very one-on-one person, and I've had too many times where I've taken on a corporate client and they say like, hey, let's jump on a Skype call or a Zoom call, and then I log in and there's 6 people on the other side. And they're all trying to talk to me, and then they all start arguing with each other because they can't decide amongst themselves. And so I'm just kind of kicking back with my feet up on the desk for 45 minutes, listening to these guys, snipe at each other, and go, what am I even here for? Personally, there are people who are great corporate copywriters. I'm not one of them. I am definitely a champion of small business because I like to be able to deal with a decision maker and go, hey, let's collaborate. Let's create some brilliance for you. Not, Betty says this and Joe says this and John disagrees, and, that let's circle the wagons and, let's do another one of these 45-minute calls tomorrow.
Right. Oh, I love it. I love it. John says, connection over control.
Absolutely.
And then I think he's totally right on that. Absolutely spot on, John. And when you have you 10 years into this business, I was going to ask you, have you come across where what needs to be done for a customer, for a client, and they are absolutely adamant they want it their way, that they just can't give it up.
Wow, you just went in right for the kill there, Henry. Yeah, no, that's one of my biggest. In fact, and this happened to me last week, and and the guy was a jerk, so I can tell the story. So the guy just is blowing up my Skype, and he's, we got to talk right now.
Oh.
And like usually that's a big red flag that if somebody's in a big hurry that they're not interested in quality. But I'm like, okay, fine. He was a referral. I at least got to talk to the guy. So he spends 45 minutes talking about a project, and I give him a quote, and he's like, well, okay, let me go look at your samples and so forth. So then the next morning he does the same thing, except he's like, hey, I want to ask you about a different project. Okay, great. Thanks for wasting 45 minutes of my time yesterday on the project you didn't want done. And then he says, I've got this fantastic sales letter. It is the greatest thing since sliced bread. I wrote it myself. And I'm like, great. Good. What are you telling me for? He says, it's not converting. Meaning, in layman's terms, for those of you out there, converting means turning a lead into a sale. Okay. So he's got the greatest thing in the history of things, but it's supposed to be sales copy and it's not generating any sales, right? So I'm like, okay, and I look at this thing, and it's about 13,000 words, which is way more than anybody's going to sit down and read. That's like what, a quarter of a novel or something? Just sit down and read a quarter of a novel so I can sell you something. Okay, and I go through it, and I'm like, look, okay, we're gonna take this thing and we're gonna scrap it and we're gonna start over, and here's how much it's going to cost, and here's how long it's going to take. And he says, no, you're not messing with my copy. There's only a few sentences that need change. If you just tweak a few sentences, I'm sure that we can make this thing sell like gangbusters. I said, okay. Which sentences? Well, I don't know that. That's your job to figure that out. Are you kidding me? Really? It's that being married to your own creation, and we get into that as copywriters too. When I've written sales pages that I'm like, man, this is the most fabulous thing I have ever written. This thing is going to crush it with my client. And then like 3 weeks later, and they're like, what's wrong with you, Lee? Man, that thing didn't sell a thing, man. There's like crickets out there. And I go, I really like that copy too. But then you just got to swallow your pride. Yep. You got to send the ego on vacation and just go, okay, let's look at the objective facts. It didn't work. It didn't connect. It didn't resonate. It didn't tap into emotions.
That's it.
It happens. Yes, and you just got to forgive yourself and go on.
Yes, I love it. I love it. And it really is true. I mean, even with just dealing outside of copy and dealing with people in general, mm-hmm. In having people control you and your whole life being determined based on what somebody says about you or what they make you feel like. Mm-hmm. You're right. I think it's understanding that, yes, sometimes it doesn't go smooth. Sometimes it's not quite right, even though you thought it was perfect. It's okay. It's okay to have that. That's not the issue. The mm-hmm. issue is how we react to all of that. And I think that's exactly appropriate. Swallow your pride. Be proud, but mm-hmm. you can learn to swallow it too and move on and then probably create the best copy you possibly can for them.
Right. And that's part of the spirituality element of it for me too, is just not creating that connection, but again, learning about myself and accepting the imperfections.
Yes.
It's coming face to face with that vulnerability and going, okay. Okay. It happened.
To be alive for you too, right?
Exactly.
And I think that's the only way. I think the only way you could be successful at that is to know when to when to hold them and know when to fold them. Thanks, Kenny Rogers. To know when it's time to say, okay, yeah, all right. I think we need to do a little bit more work here. And mm-hmm. you're right. It's it's the ones, I guess, the people that are so adamant that they're dragging the buffalo,
Mm.
and the buffalo's not helping them. You know,
No, totally uncooperative buffalo.
no, that's right. Most of the time it is.
Yeah.
You know, how can, I mean, I know your business is writing copy, but you do tap into that spiritual element, the emotional element that people have, the end user, as you mentioned.
Mhm.
For the listeners that we have here, you know, trying to, you know, bring on their own bold, suggestions that you could give them, to, even if it's just in their daily life, on what they would do to do that, to you know, unleash their legacy, to be able to face the world.
Well, the biggest thing, and this is something that I've struggled with for years, but the biggest thing that has helped me create brilliance and helps me to continue to do so is to get intentional about downtime. It's something that we're not really good at anymore because we're living in this world at a breakneck pace, and we're constantly have to be busy, and we have to fill every minute full of something. And that's not where the magic happens. You know, for me, it's when I get intentional about, look, you know, no matter what's going on, no matter how busy I am, no matter how much I have to do or how many things I've got on my mind, it is absolutely critical to take those pauses, to step back and just be still. And I don't mean necessarily physically still. You know, some of my most fantastic ideas have come to me when I'm working on a home improvement project. You know, when I'm doing something that's, you know, maybe something with my hands where my mind is just kind of free to go, you know, bumble around in SpongeBob fashion, and you just see where it goes. Because that's when your brain's busy making those neural connections. I mean, you know, that's what our brains are wired to do. They're wired to make connections.
Yes.
And, you know, that happens in most unhindered fashion when you are being intentional about downtime. So, and like today, I've had some people ask me, you know, why do you do your own? Right now, I'm refinishing my kitchen cabinets, which is, it's so far it's been a 6-month process, and my wife says I'll be happy that if these are done by this time next year, right? So did we lose the? Sorry to interrupt that. Did we lose the signal? Are we good? Okay. 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 Well, uh, yeah, I don't know. I've got such a lag. So, okay. Well, you know what? For now, I'm just going to pretend like everything's okay, and we're, you know, if somebody can tell me to shut up if I'm, if it's not right. So, um, so anyway, so they're doing this Kevorkian, you know, kitchen cabinet project, and I'm working on this today. I've got, you know, a hand sander, and I'm just going along, and then suddenly the problem that I'm working on, I've got a client that I've really been struggling with writing an email sequence for, and just in that zone of being mentally free, it all comes together. And so, you know, I
Exactly.
turn off the sander, go wash my hands, sit down, and make it happen. And I think that's what a lot of us don't do, because if we're not creating the brilliance we want to create, we just push harder. And, you know, as with everything else, you know, if you're pushing so hard against that brick wall and not getting anywhere, sometimes you've got to take it to step back and look and see if there's a door 10 feet down, because, you know, you're never going to get through that wall on your own.
You're absolutely right. It takes a community.
Absolutely. So the downtime is a big thing. For me, intentional journaling is a big thing. It's something that we all know that we should do, especially if we want to explore our creativity and tap into that brilliance. But for us, it's just another task. It's just, time out of my day that I could be spending working on something else. But if you're not doing it, your creativity suffers. My creativity suffers if I don't intentionally take a half hour every morning before I get rolling on anything else and just free write, just journal, just let the creative juices flow. Then I'm struggling for the rest of the day if I don't do that. So it's important, and actually Brian had taught me to carry a little voice recorder. It's like about the size of an old iPod. Now I just pretty much use the one on my phone because it took me like 2 days to forget about it and leave it in my pants, and then it went through the washer. So I just use the one on my phone. But just anytime that I have one of those flashes that I think I might want to explore later, then it's just a matter of hitting a button on your phone and using the voice recorder and just speaking a sentence or two, and then just letting your mind let it go. Okay, I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to worry about remembering it. I don't have to worry about fleshing it out right now. I just come back to it when I'm in a place where I can do that and spark that conversation, that narrative that was going on in my head at the time.
There you go.
Yeah, so I've got hundreds and hundreds of little sound bites that I'm probably going to listen to years from now and go, what the heck was I talking about? What? I'll even roll over in bed at 3 a.m. sometimes and just hit the button and just say something. My wife's like, "What?" I'm like, "Don't worry about it. It's just you'll see it in a couple weeks. It'll be okay." So I definitely would recommend that. That's another great tool for tapping into that brilliance and learning exactly what your own legendary, what your own bold is.
That's absolutely perfect. Absolutely perfect. Yeah, because so many of us, we don't know. I mean, we have no idea. We've never been faced with that. It's not been the issue. We've gone on methodically throughout our life and can't figure out why we're upset sometimes, or why we're depressed, or why we just don't want to be involved with that because I just get my feelers hurt. Mm-hmm. And yet it's all because of us. We do it to ourselves, and it's taking the initial steps. It's taking as Brian would always say, it's getting chop blocked, as Marcellus would say, but just laying down. It's not getting back up and moving on and doing the things that we're supposed to be doing to make ourselves stronger and be able to face ourselves, so we can find out what it is to have our legendary. And I think you're absolutely right with that. Thank you. I think that's a phenomenal answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I think a lot of people are afraid of what's in there too.
Sure.
I mean, when I talk about, using words as to access a part of myself, my inner being that I can't access otherwise, when that starts happening for people, they start going, "Oh, wow, that's that's not pretty." What is that? It's highly uncomfortable. I always say that if people tell me I'd love to be able to live inside your mind, I'm like, well, you don't want to do that because my mind is full of grimy back alleys and felonious thugs and things that go smash in the night. You don't want to be in there. But out of that comes sometimes beauty.
Exactly.
Sometimes not beauty, but it's unsettling and it's emotional and it's raw and it connects with people and it makes them think in a way that they wouldn't have otherwise had the chance to think.
Absolutely right. I have to totally agree. The concept of the spirituality of words. And like you, I have the same situation. I mean, I know that spirituality always seems to be tied with religion, and I think that's probably the last place spirituality is. It's I just don't think that's where it's at. But the energetics, the spiritual, the what makes you tick? What is it that makes our emotions swell? What makes us, I guess, flow through life. I believe, it comes so far from inside, and it's having a talent to be able to bring that out. And I think where you mentioned earlier, practice, 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 practice. When you sit down and you don't want to write, sit down and write. I guess it's like trying to do this over and over again, trying to get this down. All right, yep, you're a little, bit nervous and don't like doing it, and it's frustrating and all of that fun stuff, but do it. That's what you have to do. And so the direction that you send people, the directions that you would like to see people go, what you would like to see people accomplish for themselves, not just for the business owner, not just for the sole provider, but where is it that you like to see people be able to do for themselves?
In your mind, the limitations. Anytime that you are removing barriers and limitations for yourself or for someone else, then I consider that time well spent. Because I think that in now, as I said before, technically we are more connected than ever. It's a vast chasm of information is available, and it's probably stuck in your pocket, wherever you go. And I grew up in a time, obviously, and it's that did you, Henry, where that really wasn't the case. I mean, I had the old dusty set of encyclopedias that that took up half my room, right? And then by the time I opened any of them, they were woefully out of date, and the sun didn't revolve around the earth anymore, and the earth wasn't flat, and the dinosaurs weren't alive anymore, and all this other stuff that just wasn't relevant. But now we've got all of this completely up to date, up to the second information available at our fingertips, but we're less connected than ever, and we're more fearful than ever, and we're more limited than ever. And part of that is just because there is so much information. I mean, there's choice overload. I mean, Netflix now is talking about how one of its biggest problems is there's just too damn many choices. And people are just like, I don't know what to watch. There's 40 million shows here.
That's right.
It kind of it reminds me of when I was engaged when online dating really came about, right? But that is, I've heard so many people talk about online dating and how they can't find real meaningful relationships. Well, that's because it gives the appearance of being throwaway, right? It's when you've got 600 people to choose from that you can go out with. If you go out for coffee with somebody and they sneeze wrong, well, the heck with them. I can go find another one. And so I think that this connected society has created more anxiety than it's relieved. And so that's why I think it's so important for writers, for artists, for singers, for other musicians, for other people in the creative space to champion that human creative connection, because we're losing it. We're losing it as a society. We're losing it as individuals. And I shudder to think that what we're going to look like in 2 or 3 more generations if we don't embrace that. I mean, that's what our coaches are doing. We talked about this last week. I mean, with Henry, how coaches are so important now because they're reinstilling that human element into something that's becoming increasingly dehumanizing. Right.
groups. Of course, they can't communicate with each other because there's too much fear and hatred and discrimination involved in it. And I think you're right. And I was kind of curious, the technology, which makes it so much easier for us to communicate, but we communicate on such a superficial level anymore, where it's not the deep-rooted, the handshake, what was meaningful as we grew up. It's no longer that. It's very superficial. It's almost like platitudes now. And I mean, I guess you do that with the texting, OMG, it's there's so much lost in all of that, I think. So if there's something that you would like to do, Lisa, we have about 8 minutes to the hour. Any things that you would like to get out there for the folks that are watching and listening, that you feel would be really important for them to start pondering? Let's put it that way.
Absolutely. As I was saying, you don't have to be Hemingway to create change, to create transformation, and to create connection, whether you're writing, whether you're creating visual art, whether you're creating the art of conversation. It's not something where you have to be perfect at it and then go do it. I think some of us have so much of that vulnerability issue inside of us that we're afraid that we're going to be judged if we're not perfect. And so we don't do it. We don't dare tap into our own brilliance because of what somebody might say, of what somebody might think, of what somebody might do if they think we're wrong. And I've been as guilty of this as anybody. It might come as a shock to you, but I was kind of like the little skinny nerd kid in school. Even though I had visions when I was like 14 of being a pro wrestler when I grew up because I was watching WWE. What you gonna do when these 13-inch pythons come down on you? It just doesn't have the right ring to it, right? But so I was the small kid, and I was also the smartest kid in class or whatever. In first grade, I was I was in the town newspaper on the front page because I was reading at a high school grade level and or whatever. So which is great from an academic standpoint, but from a social standpoint, it meant that every time I turned around, I was looking at the inside of a trash can with my feet in the air. Or getting shoved in a locker, or just having the crap kicked out of me, however it works. So I learned from a very early age that other people are to be feared. Okay. And that's something that I carried with me well into adulthood. I think a lot of us do that in different ways. We're still carrying those old fears. Somebody who was overweight as a child, and even if they have the perfectly proportioned body as an adult, they're still carrying that old fear around with them. Of the name calling and the exclusion and the derision, and part of that creative process is not getting rid of that, but diving into it and learning to accept. And by accepting, we let go. So, if I had to say anything, even if what you write, what you create never sees the light of day beyond your four walls, it's still important work because it's giving you freedom. It's breaking your chains. It's allowing you to be and think and feel and experience this world as you truly should, to take it in instead of to constantly live in fear and to live in regret later because you had that fear.
Absolutely right. Thank you.
Because you let that fear control your life, I guess I should say.
Absolutely. Wow. Thank you. I appreciate that, Lee. This is fun. I appreciate this, Lee. This is really good. It's really good to finally sit down and get a good chance to just talk to you and say hi and see how things are going. And
I know. Absolutely. Yeah. We've known each other for a while, but never really sit down and had a conversation at length. So, all of you who are listening at home, you've witnessed not only a conversation, you've witnessed an interesting little experiment here. So I think it's been a great time. And I can't see the feed here. My phone fritzed out on me, but, I'm hoping that the people that are listening to this have gotten something very, very positive and hopefully very inspiring out of this. And if nothing else, to be a little more gentle with yourself, to allow that creativity to happen, and to not keep telling yourself, I'm not creative, I can't do this, I couldn't do this, I couldn't do that.
No.
What's the good? There's too many other people in the world who are telling you what you can't do.
Yeah.
Screw that. You need to tell yourself you can.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, if you tell yourself you can, or you tell yourself you can't, you're correct. It's, you may as well do it on the positive side. I mean, it's not a win or lose. I think it's the experience. It's
Absolutely.
just the challenge to do things and the experience of getting it done. And it's been tremendously insightful. I thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this. I'm having a ball.
That's great. That's great, Henry. As am I. And I'm looking forward to. We doing this again next week?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
why not?
Okay, we're doing it again next week.
I think
everybody at home's like, oh no, well we're gonna find something else to do on Wednesday. Lee's gonna be back on listen to him yammer for another hour.
What's that? I can't wait till Brian's back. I can't wait till Brian's back.
All right, well, listen, I know you got to wrap it up. So, Henry, I'm going to shut up for a minute, and how about you bring it on home?
All righty. I thank you so much, Lee, and I really do appreciate you being here. Thank you. And listen, everybody, I want to thank you too for actually, investing a little bit of time, or, well, you could see it as wasting time, whichever way you want to look at it. But, investing the time with us. And I really do appreciate it. Like I says, Brian will be about 6 or 7 weeks, I think, before he's back at full operation. Again, that's probably debatable whether Brian's ever at full operation, but that's okay. And but for the guy that's got the shunt in his head, I wish him well. I hope that he is resting and recovering, and hopefully he did not sit up and watch this, and he actually did go to sleep, and he can catch it on the rebroadcast. But I'm going to go ahead and shut this down now, and thank you very much for everything. Enjoy your evening, the rest of it, and hopefully tune in tomorrow for Thursday. That's our last day of the week is tomorrow, so I look forward to seeing you then. Thanks a lot, and have a great one.